I still think, even though what we do is a visual medium, I still think writing is the biggest part of what we do that sets people apart. From what I said earlier, just think of being creative. And so I watch guys that I respect.
Welcome to the Next Level Journalist, where you will hear from some of the best journalists in the business or who have been there, done that, and willing to share with you what they've learned so you can get better, faster.
My guest today is the co-host for Blue Jackets Live and Reds Live, Brian Giesenschlag. Thank you so much for making time for this today.
No problem, Kyle. It's good to see you. Good to catch up a little bit.
No doubt it has been. Like I told you before we hopped on here, it's just a matter of time before I reached out to you because as we talked, I've known you for quite some time. When you came to Cincinnati, just happened to be when I was an intern, so I consider myself very fortunate to have crossed paths with you when you did, and the fact that you will make time for a former intern, and that just speaks, I think, volumes about the person you are. So again, thanks for making time for this, and I know everything that you're going to share with us.
No, this is good. And when you reminded me how long ago you interned at Fox 19, I couldn't believe it. I mean, that was my first year there. You were one of my first interns, or our first interns.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to be honest with you, I don't remember all of the interns we've had. I remember Kyle Scott right from the start. And so, yeah, I don't mind at all. It's good to catch up. If it has to be this way, and then maybe beyond this, we can catch up a little bit more. But it's good to see you.
Yeah, no doubt. It's probably because I kept on bugging you guys, so that might be why you remember me. Well, Brian, let's go back to not to when we first met, but rather back to when you knew you wanted to get into the TV industry. When, why, and just take us along that journey that is the TV career for you.
Well, for me, it's pretty simple. Because like most of us growing up, I love sports. I grew up in a small town in Texas, and it's exactly what you think it was. We didn't have soccer. We didn't have anything else. You played football.
Right.
You could squeeze in a little basketball in the off season, but only because it helped just stay in shape for spring workouts and football. And I loved it. I loved everything about where I grew up and the passion for high school football there. And like most of us, man, I wanted to play in college. I wanted to play in the NFL. I wanted that part of the dream. And as soon as things came into focus, and I was a good high school football player, and I was a good high school football player. But you come to the realization, that at some point that's not going to be your career. And so pretty much when I was about 16, 17 years old, I just started thinking, man, I just want to find a way to stay around it. If I'm not going to be playing on Sundays, if I'm probably not playing on Saturdays, I want to be around it. So I started, I had already been watching local sportscasts and things like that. There were a couple of guys. So in the little town where I was kind of between Austin and Waco, and I could see both local station, or, the handful of stations that we got from each of those markets. And there were a couple of guys that I liked the way they did things, and I thought, well, that's kind of a cool job. And so, like a lot of us, I wrote a letter. This was in the late '80s. I wrote a letter to one of the sports directors, and it turned out it was a sports director in Waco, and he got back to me, just briefly. But then I asked the questions about, what did you do and how did you get here? And he was nice enough to share some of that with me. And my whole family pretty much went to Texas A&M. And so when I grew up, that's where I went to games. That's where the family fandom was. That's where I went to sports camps. And so I was kind of on that path for sure to go to Texas A&M. But the station was in Waco, and I started talking to this guy there, and he had gone to Baylor. And one thing led to another, and by the time I was getting ready to figure out college, I ended up going to Baylor instead of A&M, which is a whole different discussion about what that did to my family and our relationships there. But that's where I landed, and I stayed in touch with the same guy. He was so good to me. His name is John Morris. He was at the local CBS in Waco. He has since become the football, basketball, everything, voice of Baylor. So he obviously just had a big weekend in Indianapolis a week or so ago. But he was really good to me. So I interned there. I interned at another station in Waco. And by the time I graduated, I had a job, not in sports. And I know you and everyone else who's done this knows that that's typically the path. It wasn't in sports, but I had a job at a local station the next day after I graduated, and I was in Waco for a while, and that's kind of how it started. But to get back to your original question, just the passion for sports, I could never see myself as a kid, and still can't see myself now as doing anything, behind a desk or selling anything. That's just not me. It's just not how I'm wired. And I still have a passion for sports and feel unbelievably blessed that somehow, with everything that's changed and all these years later, it's worked out that I still get to talk about it and do it.
Well, I love how you mentioned how you obviously in the late 80s when you said you made a handwritten note. Like if someone were to do that today, that would stand out, I feel like, as opposed to emails that get lost in the mix so easily. That old school way of doing things. I just talked to someone the other day on here, just how she still sends handwritten notes, and I think that makes an impact. I mean, it obviously made an impact then.
Yeah, and I think that's not to get too far off on a tangent, but a lot of things have changed about communication and connection, and if we're talking professionally about the industry, those things are still important.
Yeah.
I still would rather hear from somebody. If it's about something substantial, I still want to hear from somebody rather than get a text. And don't get me wrong, I don't want, I do enjoy the convenience of the text and the email, but when it's important, when someone has something meaningful or it's a thank you, not to sound like too much of an old man, but that's still important. And and all of us know in what we do professionally, just how important connection is. And when you stand out that way, I think that definitely still makes a difference.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I just think it speaks to your character when you take the time to actually write a handwritten note that takes a little more effort than
I didn't
an
have a
email.
choice at the time. Remember, I didn't have a choice in the late 80s. It was either
True.
drop it in the mail or pick up the phone, and I didn't think he would answer the phone. So
True, but still, maybe
that,
some of this younger generation could pick up on something like that. So, all right, so Brian, you go from Waco to where? Or tell us about your time in Waco first.
yeah, so it was great. So my first job was at one of the two stations I interned for. It was the ABC affiliate in Waco, and I started I think I was hired as just a shooter, and then pretty quickly was offered a news reporter position. It was still a one-man band mostly, the way they were doing things at the time. But my in was, I had interned with the sports director, and he had been there a while, and he liked me. And I'll tell you, I think I was a pretty good shooter right off the bat. And, like most of us did, he sent us to high school football games and things. And as an intern, I got to pick up a camera. And for some reason, he was overly impressed. I thought I was good. He thought I was great. He was overly impressed with what I did that way. And so that was kind of my in with the news director, was that the sports director liked me. So I shot there for a while, then was a news reporter for a while. But that same news director that gave me those opportunities initially tried to steer me away from sports. Like, I'm sure you've had that conversation with people as well. And he said, look, you don't know how many tapes I get. You're never going to get a position here. You're likely not going to get one somewhere else. Maybe you should think about this. And so that was my first time I was confronted with someone kind of challenging what I thought I wanted to do professionally.
Mm-hmm.
And I had to make a decision there. And right from the start, I just thought, you know what, there are positions out there. There's no reason that I can't get some of them if I do things the right way and continue kind of on the path that I'm on. So I stuck it out. My mom lost faith in me pretty quickly because they offered me a position as the bureau reporter at Fort Hood in Killeen, Texas. So at the time, it's one of the largest military bases in the world, and this station in Waco had a bureau there, and he wanted me to take that position, the news director, and I couldn't see it. I knew that if I got out of the newsroom, and I knew that if I wasn't around on Fridays and weekends, that I would lose touch with the sports department. And so he essentially told me that if I didn't take that position, that he was probably going to have to let me go. Uh, and I told him I just couldn't do it. My mom thought I was crazy. You're just out of college. You don't turn down a job. You don't do this. You can figure it out. And I just couldn't do it. Ended up staying on there. Eventually got back in the sports department there, started filling in. Then when someone left, I got a job. And about a year after I got the job there, I changed stations to the CBS affiliate in town, which is where I had written my letter and kind of interned there as well. And the guy that had given me the opportunity had just left to go to Baylor to work full time there in the broadcasting department there. And so you're going to like this. So when I got to the CBS affiliate in Waco in the mid 90s, as the weekend sportscaster, my sports director had just been promoted from weekends to the main gig. And it was Robert Flores, who was at ESPN and is now at MLB Network. And so he and I have stayed in touch over the years. But yeah, for about probably 3 years, he and I were worked together at the CBS in Waco, and had a blast. I had a really good time because he's obviously really talented and really fun to work with. And at the time, we had our own sports photographer. We just had resources that right now, for the most part, most places don't have anymore. So for being a small market, we get to do a lot of cool things. And that was it was while I was there doing that, then I kind of went, okay, this is what I hoped it would be. This is really fun. I'm really enjoying what I'm doing. And so that kind of gave me what I needed to continue on when a lot of my friends were getting corporate jobs and making a lot of money. I was not making a lot of money, but I was having a great time and still living in Waco, Texas. So that was the next step. I'm going to catch a breath, and then I'll tell you what's after that if you're interested.
Yeah, absolutely, Brian. No, I get it. I mean, in any way it gets into this, I mean, I think they tell them from day one that you're not going to make a lot of money, but the experiences that you get along the way, you can't. My first job, I ended up working at the World Series. My first job was in Paducah, Kentucky. Yeah. Cardinals just happened to make it to the World Series. Not a fan of the Cardinals, but guess what? It punched my ticket to the World Series. So, go Cardinals. So
yeah, I mean, think about that. We're in Waco, Texas, which obviously is, at the time, I think it was market 93 or something like that. But we covered all the Cowboys home games in Dallas. We covered training camp for the Cowboys. We covered the old Southwest Conference before it became the Big 12. We got around. I mean, we traveled a little bit, which was exactly what I wanted to do. I wanted to go places. I wanted to be at the games. I wanted to get in and meet people, and that job kind of gave me that opportunity. So I was really enjoying that a lot, but had been at this time, I'd been in Waco about 8 years, if you include, 4 years in college and 4 years or so afterwards working. And, in a college town, there's kind of that age gap. There's the college population and then the older people who have moved back to town and are working now. And there wasn't a lot going on, for people in my demographic. Most of them had moved to Dallas or Houston or Austin or San Antonio or somewhere like that. And a lot of my friends, that's where they were. And so I was, on my off days, I was going to, see people in Dallas and hang out with friends there. And so I started seeing a girl in Dallas that now is my wife. And she said, we're dating, and this is just kind of a funny side story. She told her friends that I was geographically undesirable because she lived in Dallas and worked in Dallas, and I was an hour and a half away in Waco, and I worked weekends. So when was I going to have time to date someone in Dallas?
Yeah.
So it's not like I was actively every day looking for a way out of Waco because I really enjoyed it. But at the time, there was the powerhouse station in Dallas, WFAA, which at that time was really a powerhouse and really well respected around the country as just being one of the best local stations out there. They had started kind of a side sister station that was a cable channel that was going to be broadcast all around the state. It was called Texas Cable News. And so we were going to kind of repurpose the programming of all of the BELO stations in Texas and it was a startup, and there was, they put so much into it. The facilities were fantastic, the people were fantastic, and it was in Dallas, and I knew someone that was there that kind of got me in the door. And so I got this job at Texas Cable News as a news guy, as an anchor. There wasn't going to be really a sports department at the beginning, but I just knew when I was talking to this guy, I said, you can't fill this amount of programming on this 24-hour Texas cable news channel and not do a lot of sports. You just can't do it. That wasn't on their initial list, but I knew they couldn't do it. So I reluctantly left my fun sports job in Waco to take this news job in Dallas at the cable channel that was just starting. And it got me to Dallas. A couple of years later, the girl I was dating, we got married in Dallas. We lived in Dallas, and turns out I was right. So after a little bit of time there, they decided they could sell sports programming. So I started doing things there, and we weren't really going a lot of places. That's not how it was designed. We were repurposing things from the other stations, but we were doing new things, anything we could generate revenue with. So we were doing, call-in talk shows on television, which, kind of got popular. We were using the print guys from the Dallas Morning News when that started to get popular on ESPN, 25 years ago. There were great print guys at the Dallas Morning News, which were also owned by the same company that we worked for. And so we were putting those guys on TV and doing shows kind of in the model that ESPN had just started a few years earlier. And it was great. It worked. But after a while, I knew that I didn't want to just talk to the other guys that were covering things. I wanted to be out, like you say all the time, telling stories and doing things on my own. So that kind of led me to my next, okay, now what's next? I've been in Dallas for a while. I'm married. I'm about to have kids. Now what do I do? So that's the path that went from tiny Cameron, Texas to Waco, Texas to Dallas, and then eventually Ohio.
Yeah, that's a huge move as a Texas guy through and through. That's kind of surprising, especially knowing that you made it to Dallas. So I talk about that process of deciding, what, you got to leave Texas in order to. It sounds like to get back into the sports.
Right. Well, let me be clear that even though I was working in Dallas in the number 6 or 7 market in the country, the little cable channel behind WFAA was not really Dallas TV. We weren't making Dallas money. That's not what it was designed to be. So I got to live there and do some cool things, but it wasn't like I left a top 10 market to come to Ohio. I was still looking for that really good local gig back when the local station was still something that I think you and I really enjoyed a lot. And so I had been looking, I had an agent at the time, and had been looking and had a couple of good interviews. I interviewed a couple of really good places, and one of them I didn't think was the right place. One of them I really liked a lot, didn't get it, thought I had it, didn't get it. And so I was going through that process that most of us go through, and starting to doubt a little bit again. I was never really down. I never started looking at, should I sell insurance or do something right now? But when you have a kind of a family and you're young and you've been doing it a while and you kind of try to see where you are and where it might go, I think you start to question again. And so I did that a little bit. And then my agent called and she said, hey, what about Cincinnati? Cincinnati, really? All of our families in Texas, and I knew we would probably leave. My wife and I knew we would leave at some point, just because I knew the landscape pretty well in Texas. But she said, "What about Cincinnati?" She said, "There's a weekend job. I know some people, and they like your tape. They want you to come interview." And I said, "Great." And my wife's favorite line is, I said Cincinnati to her, and she said, "I don't think I can find it on a map." And so, do you want to move your family up there and do that? Anyway, I interviewed at XIX on December 26th, the day after Christmas, 2004, and went to a Bengals game with Dan Horde and those guys. And spent the weekend there, and then came back, and they offered me the job. And the next month, I was up there. My wife we just had our first baby in Dallas, and when he was 6 months old, we moved up here, and it was exactly what I wanted. It was the best thing to do because uh, it got me to a bigger market, but where I was back out doing things. I was doing the Bengals, I was doing the Reds, UC, Xavier, all the high school stuff, which is so big, and which to me, coming from Texas, was still a big part of the draw for me. I didn't want to work
Mm-hmm.
somewhere where high school sports didn't matter. I still really love that. And so, yeah, we got here, and it was set up well. We had resources, we had staff, we had support to do things, and it was exactly what I wanted, and exactly a really interesting experience and a cool experience for someone who had never lived outside Texas before. And my wife at the time, she said, and she was great about it. She was excited too, but she said, "What do you think? 5 years, and then we go back to Dallas or Austin?" And I went, "Sure, 5 years." And that was 16 years ago. That's how it usually works out. So 16 years ago, 3 kids later, here we are.
So you spend time at XIX, and then let's talk about that transition into, like I said, you're now the co-host for Columbus Blue Jackets, Cincinnati Reds, and you've been doing that for a while now.
Yeah. Well, the next phase of the career came when uh, things changed at most local television stations around the country, and sports got fewer resources. The staffing was cut back, and I understand a lot of it, and I know some people thrive that way, and it just wasn't me. I never really got to that point. It wasn't me. I really liked having a group of people to work with. I didn't like being there, being the only person there however many days a week to do the whole thing and try to figure the whole
Mm-hmm.
thing out. And so I started looking at different things. And right from the time that I got here, I'd been fortunate enough to get involved a little bit with Fox Sports Ohio, where when Dan Horde left town the first time, he had been working on the Reds pregame show. He'd been doing features, I think, for the Reds pregame show. And when he left, I was able to pick up some of that work just as the feature reporter. So while I was working at XIX, I would shoot some things, Reds related, some features, and feed those to those guys over there. And I got to know those people pretty well, and eventually, got to fill in a little bit with the Reds pre and post game show every now and then. And then about 8 years ago, I was kind of at the end of my rope with XIX, and so I'd been helping out, at Fox Sports Ohio that whole time, and I kind of went to those guys, my bosses there, and I made my pitch. I went in and I said, look, I really want to transition from what I'm doing locally to work more with you guys. Can I do this? Can I do this? Can I do this? I came up with everything I could think of, and it wasn't even all full-time stuff. Can I just help out and do this? But I want to start moving more that direction. And I got no, 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 no. Oh yeah, and no. And it just didn't go anywhere. And I left that meeting, and I was mad. And I just, a lot of things were going through my head at this point. And a day later, the person at Fox Ohio that I talked to called me, and I'll never forget. I think I was taking one of my kids to the dentist, and I was sitting in the parking lot, and my phone rang, and I saw it was him, and I didn't even answer it. I just saw it was him, and I went, I don't want to talk to him. I just talked to him yesterday, and it didn't go well. I don't want to talk, so I didn't answer. And he left me a message, and I finally listened to it, and he said, "Call me back." And I called him back, and he said, "Hey, I know you weren't happy when we talked yesterday, and I had a couple of thoughts, but I couldn't say anything to you at the time until I talked to a few other people about it." He said, "But how do you feel about hockey?" And I went from mad to I don't even know what beyond was, because of all the things that I had pitched that I could, fake my way through, I didn't even touch hockey, because I went, man, I grew up in Texas. I don't know anything about hockey. When I was in Dallas at the cable channel, the Stars won the Stanley Cup, and so I'd done some highlights and talked about that team a little bit, but that was kind of the extent of my hockey. And he goes, look. He says, we've got an analyst. We've got former players. he said, we need somebody right now to host and do the TV part of it. And he said, I think you can do that. And I said, look, I said, you know, I'm not going into a situation where all these hockey lifers are as an outsider who doesn't know the game. And I'm not going to ask them to accept me or, let me try to learn on the fly. I said, I don't think that's fair to all of those people that have put all this time into this sport to throw me in the mix. They said, no, no, no. They said, just talk to some people to try to shorten this story a little bit. That's what I did. I called everybody that I would be working with, and I was really honest, and I said, here's where I am. Do I think I could do this? Do I have confidence in myself that I can figure this out? Absolutely. But I don't want to put you guys in that position because that's not really a good position to be in. They were all great. They were fantastic. And so I took the job. It was just for hockey for the 6 months of the hockey season, and I had nothing else, for the other 6 months of the year. But it was what I wanted to do to kind of move in that direction. It was a great challenge, and my wife and I now kind of say that, isn't it funny that hockey kind of saved my career and kind of saved our spot here in Cincinnati, because that was not anywhere close to being on our radar. And 9 years now later, I love it. I love that part of my job, covering the Blue Jackets, and that led me to getting the Reds hosting work too, because before hockey season was over, they said, hey, we're creating a studio aspect to the Reds pre and post game show, and we'd like you to do that too. And I was blown away because, most people that do what I do have seasonal work, and you kind of figure out what to do the rest of the year. And all of a sudden I was being given the opportunity to have year round work, hosting these shows, working for these teams. And so, yeah, hockey kind of saved me that way. And that's kind of the most interesting part of my story, I guess, is that the kid from small town Texas who had no idea what icing and cross-checking was, it kind of turned into that professionally and helped me out.
Yeah, I love that story, Brian. I mean, who's to say what would happen if you don't go in there and, make your pitch to them, they say no, and you think you're done.
Yeah.
And then for you to have the transparency to reach out to people, not taking it for granted that they were going to put you in hockey without that experience. Like I said, I think that just speaks to the type of person you are. So hopefully people are picking that up. I mean, there are so many things about that story that I could resonate with. So hopefully, again, so do the people that see this, because those are like the intangible stuff that you really can't. I mean, I guess you could tell people, but it's hard to teach them that kind of stuff. So, but I know that's what separates you. That's what makes you such a good person on air, a good person in general, but that people can like. And I don't think it's a coincidence at all. It led to Reds Live. So that's neat to hear how that all came full circle. I had no idea that hockey saved you.
That was it. We still say it. So I was in Columbus last night. They've been in the playoffs 4 consecutive years. It's not going to happen this year. But it's also good. I'll just say this. I also enjoy kind of working in 2 different universes, not only sports wise, but, I live in Cincinnati, obviously, and the Reds play more games than the Blue Jackets do. So the bulk of my work is here, but getting to go to Columbus and all the friends and people that I work with that I've made in Columbus, it's just really kind of expanded, my circle, I guess, for the guy who moved here and didn't know anybody, and still all of our family are back in Texas. It's not just limited to Cincinnati now. I've got so many great friends in Cincinnati. I've got a lot of great friends in Columbus. It's not that big of a deal to drive to Columbus a bunch during the hockey season. And I really enjoy kind of getting up there and being in a different scene than I am the rest of the year when I'm at the ballpark down here.
Well, Brian, I know I've already taken plenty of your time up here, but I want to try to, because there's plenty of other avenues we could go down. From storytelling, I've always respected your ability to tell a story, and we might touch on that, but I want to ask you first, what kind of advice would you give someone who's trying to break through? I mean, if they listen to your story, hopefully they pick up on some tips just of that. But what would you say to someone who's trying to, get that first opportunity?
Yeah, just the same thing that I think you would tell people is, we've kind of been through some of it, is people are going to tell you no. So be okay with no. Don't lose confidence in yourself. Have a little bit of a thick skin from time to time, because people are going to tell you things sometimes that make you really doubt. Um, I got that, and I know you've probably got that along the way somewhere. But if it really is your dream and it really is your passion, at least um, put everything you can into it. I know lots of people that wanted to do this that bailed pretty early in the process because they looked around, and like you and I talked about, your friends that you graduated with are in different jobs and making more money or living where they want to live, as opposed to where you could get your first job or two in TV, or not being away from family. One of the biggest things was working weekends. um, just evaluate how much you want to do it, and if you really want to do it, stick with it, because there are jobs. And now, even though everything has changed a good bit, in some ways it's changed in a way that creates a lot more opportunity for people. So I tell kids now, there you don't, when I was growing up, you had to be the local news sportscaster, or you were Pat Summerall on Sunday afternoon, and then it's not limited to that by any stretch anymore. There's so many different avenues and venues and things you can do. And so keep that in mind. People told me, um, you need to change your name. You can't be on TV with a name like Giesenschlag. And one news director along the way seriously asked me to change my name, and I told him no.
Wow.
Because I thought, what? I need anything I can get that makes me stand out. I don't want to be more
Yeah.
generic. That's
Yeah.
kind of one of the other things that I tell people is just don't be like everybody else. Find your voice and who you are, and do it that way. And I knew my name, made me stand out. Uh, I had another news director who told me, early on, I shaved my head after I got to the cable channel in Dallas. And my hair was, I never liked my hair, but I wasn't bald. It was receding. And I had a news director tell me, you're never going to get jobs, since you don't have hair. And I went, you know what? That's cool too, but I'm going to make this work. And it's another way that I stand out. When I would send resume tapes to people, how many did they get from some guy with 12 letters in his last name who was bald? Um, and so that was one of the other things. And I think you just have to believe in yourself. So find your voice. Don't do it like anybody else. There are things that and Joe Daneman he's heard my speeches over and over, my frustration speeches of watching someone else on TV and go, why did you say that? Why did you say it that way? That makes no sense. You would never say that in casual conversation, but for some reason you say that on TV because that's what you've heard people say over the years. Think of a new way to say it. Think of a smarter way to say it. Think of a more conversational or descriptive way to say it, but don't use the same phrases that you've heard on sportscasts over the last 25 years. Find your voice, do it that way. And since I know your passion is storytelling, that's what I wanted to make sure I squeezed in here.
Yeah.
People have always asked me, oh, you do sports on TV, you must want to work at ESPN. While, you know what, I would certainly listen to an opportunity like that. That's never been what drives me or what I'm chasing professionally, that I derive, satisfaction from professionally. For me, it's always been the stories. So, I like, more than anchoring, I love getting out and finding an angle and a story or a personal note about somebody that hasn't been done or hasn't been told well, and doing that. And I was able to do that even when I was kind of unhappy with a lot of other things that were going on in my career. I was able to do that when I was doing features for the Reds. I've been able to continue doing that way. And that's what really kind of feeds me is doing those pieces and getting to talk to people, and then try to write something in a way that isn't, the Reds lost today to the Giants and no one was happy about it, soundbite. Everybody does that, and there are a lot of people that don't mind that, but that's not what I want. I want to find out about someone. I want to write something creative, something that has my voice and that tells a good story, and do it that way. So, what's my dream job? I would like to, at this point in my career, who knows what happens? I'm terribly happy doing what I'm doing right now. But when people say, hey, what would you do if you could just, move, make everything work out and go do it. I would work on real sports on HBO, or in the past, the format has changed now, but when ESPN was doing a lot of E60, I would love to be able to tell those longer form features and really dig a little bit, not be bound by a 2-minute feature piece or something like that. That's what I love. I know you love the same thing. And I get to dip my toe in it enough that I really still enjoy it. But that would be something that, at the end of the day, if you said, what would you like to do? That's where I would go and do it.
What would you? Last question for you, Brian. Promise.
Hey, I'm good, man.
How would you encourage someone to develop that storytelling skill, and any other skills that come to mind? But obviously, the storytelling one, because I know, like you said, as you know, that can really separate you from a lot of people. If you can tell a good story, that will separate you from so many people. And your name, again, Joe Daneman, who you referred to before. For those who don't know, he's the sports director at XIX now in Cincinnati. Joe's a great storyteller, but he points everything to Brian. He's like, Brian was such a great storyteller. So how would you suggest someone develop that skill?
Well, first off, that's extremely nice of Joe to say that. He's Joe. I'm going to take 30 seconds and get on Joe here because I love Joe so much. Joe can do anything. You know that. He could do anything from anchoring, writing, editing, shooting, anything. And it would be better than what almost all of us would do. And so when I was early on at XIX, I really enjoyed doing the stories, but I wanted Joe to take a script that I gave him and then do Joe things to it, One of the first stories I did was the Kentucky Derby in about 2005, when I probably, when you were there interning with us. I had never been. I had no idea what was going on, and they sent me down there, and they said, look, you don't even have to go inside. Just stand outside and pick off celebrities and have some fun with that. And I did that, and I got Usher coming into the Kentucky Derby. And I talked, had a little quick walk and talk with him and a handful of other people, and I brought it back to Joe that day, and he had, 2 hours to get it ready for air. And I went back in, and this is one of my first experiences with him. I went back in and looked at what he had done with it and was just blown away. Back when we were illegally using music on the air, he had dropped in some Usher tracks in between the questions, and it was so good. So different people you work with, certainly if you're paying attention and if you're smart, you'll grow and get better from working with people and seeing how they think and how they do it. By the same token, you can watch people who aren't very good or who have bad habits or who don't care enough about the process to put the work in, and you can become equally like those people, and they can bring you down. So the first thing I would say is make sure the people that you're watching and the things that you're watching on the air, that they're good, and watch the process of how that person works or how that person thinks, and ask yourself, is that unique? Is that good? Is this someone that I should look at? And then look at some of the stuff that they do. I watch a ton of things, work that other people that they do, nationally, locally, and all those things, to get ideas and just see. Within that context, just find your own voice, as I said before. I made a promise to myself early on. I would never say anything on air that I don't say in casual conversation. I would never tell you, Kyle, I was playing pickup basketball with my buddies at the gym, and you'll never guess what happened. We were losing, we're getting our brains beat in, and I suffered an injury. And I hear people say, and he suffered this injury. And that's fine. It's, maybe somebody does say that in conversation, but I wouldn't. Sure. And so I've never said something like that on the air. I hate when anytime you see a game or a highlight and there's an accident or an injury or something terrible happens, and I bet without me even saying it, you could probably spout off what 90% of sports people on TV would say during that highlight, scripted or not. They would say, and then scary moment. And I'm going, you know what? Think of a different way to say that something just happened. Don't just say, and in the third, scary moment. On lap 397, scary moment. So find your own voice, find your way of saying things, be creative. I still think, even though what we do is a visual medium, I still think writing is the biggest part of what we do that sets people apart. From what I said earlier, just think of being creative. And so I watch guys that I respect, Tom Rinaldi, people like that I see that do work on HBO. When a story starts, don't just start with exactly what it is. Think of the big picture and be creative with how you bring people in. You get one chance at the beginning of a story, a feature story, to get people's attention or to make them interested or whatever. And yes, always use the video. Use what you can use nat sound wise, but don't set them up from the start to think that this is going to be exactly what they think it is, exactly what they've seen 100 times on the other things. Say something, write something, show something, make them hear something that makes the viewer think, okay, this is kind of different. This might be different. And that's how I try to think of everything. Even if it's just a generic story about the Reds, I try to think of it that way. And just don't stop thinking that way, and don't stop listening and watching and observing other people you respect around you. And I think you'll be good. And for that reason, I still watch Joe all the time. I text Joe all the time at night. Man, I really like what you did with that. Great job. How did you do this? How did you come up with that? Where did you get that? Share ideas with people you respect, and I think you'll never go wrong that way.
Always working at your craft, hopefully, among other things that people pick up in this conversation, totally. Like you're never too old or too young, like definitely too young. I've met so many people who think they get that first job and they think they've made it and they know everything there is to know. I think I might have made that mistake as well, but never stop learning is the first thing that came to mind when you were sharing just what you said about Joe, So that's, like I said, so much great stuff, Brian. I know we went a little long here, but so much appreciative of, again, you making time for this and everything that you shared with us today.
Kyle, we went a little long because I wouldn't shut up. That's why we went a little long. And so that's on me, but thanks for giving me the opportunity to talk and catch up with you. I've got a ton of respect for you and what you're doing, what you have done, and I hope we can catch up and cross paths again, man.
No doubt. Every bit of it was gold, though, Brian, man. I appreciate it again, and we'll talk to you soon.
And thank you for checking out this channel. If you found this content beneficial, I'd appreciate it if you hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and share it with someone you think might find it beneficial as well, because this channel was simply started and created to serve you, to help others grow, to learn how other successful TV journalists do or did it. So take what serves you so you can get better faster and reach your next level.